John, happy Tuesday.
Hey Dean, how's it going?
Okay, my friend. Today's topic is one where, I like to think about these really, really basic questions. And then, when you ask yourself a really, really fundamental, simplistic question, you're kind of hoping that you don't actually know the answer. You just assume that you did, right?
Of
And
course.
those are the best kind of thought experiments. And one of the ones that came up over the last year was like, why do people register for a webinar and then attend the live session, right? Some people register for a webinar just to like watch the replay, but a lot of people will register for a webinar and then they'll attend the live session. And you ask, like, why do people do that? And like, it turns out there are like four groups of people in an audience, a typical webinar or a live event or a LinkedIn live kind of event like this. Four kinds of people who attend, and their reasons are different from each other, right? And the first, like category one, if you want to call them categories, those are the people that, every client that I have tells me, like, this is it, right? They want the information that the webinar is promising, and they trust that the person or the source or the company doing the webinar will have that information.
Mhm.
By the way, most of the people who register but only want to see the replay video would also fall into this category. They're there for the information, right?
Right.
And people who work at your competition, not I do mostly B2B, right? So there's always competition. The people who work at your competition tend to also fall into category one, except they're not necessarily interested in the topic. They're looking to see if you're doing something or you know something or you're saying something that they aren't in
Right.
the marketplace.
Yep.
So that's category one, right? I worked at Nokia. Every webinar we had, someone from Cisco was going to be there, like I guarantee it. Right?
Mhm.
And so the obvious answer, right, is that the person is interested and thinks you can tell them something that they don't know. Category one, but that's not everybody in the audience. It might not even be the majority, right? The second group, um, the second group want an excusable reason to stop working. By the way, this is why you always offer like integrated calendar invitations during your webinar process. Like you register and it says, click here to add to your calendar. You always want to make sure that that's working, it's functional, and it's offered to everybody, right? So people can immediately block out that time on their calendar. Everyone else at work sees that they're quote unquote busy during that time, right? The person who registers can look at that appointment on their calendar, in the morning and say, oh, 2:00 webinar, right? They might make a decision to override it or ignore it or just not show up. But everyone else at work thinks that that time's already been booked.
Yep. And I
And
will
this is
say,
why, yeah, go ahead.
I'm glad you mentioned that because way too many webinars that I noticed that I've registered for or whatever, they have the little stuff to add to your calendar, but they don't work.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you mentioned, hey, make sure that works because
You
it
got to
really is
test
important.
everything every time,
I
every
know
time, right?
people who do tons of webinars,
Yeah.
it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Surprises me.
Yeah. So, like, the second group of people really will register and book a webinar and get it on their calendar just so they have an excusable way to not work, right? And this is why business webinars are never held in the evening, right? They're
Yep.
never held on weekends. Like, no one shows up for those because they're already done with their workday. I mean, these webinars aren't really work, but they're definitely not leisure or
No.
entertainment or fun, right? And so knowing that those people are there when we, my team, when we like want to get and keep that audience's attention, we need to use a lot of the techniques that speechwriters use, like creating tension or adding something unexpected or counterintuitive to the message, and keep doing that like throughout the presentation.
Right.
And then the third category of people are a variation, but very different than the second category who are just trying to avoid work. The third category of people want something to be playing while they're working. So they'll work during your presentation, right? These are the people who use webinars as background radio, right? Some people like to be around live stuff, right? They like live stuff happening in their environment. It
Mm.
feels different to them than having a recorded video playing or music playing, right? If you've ever been on a conference call that really you didn't need to join, but you stayed on because you didn't have to pay attention while you did your work, right? It's basically the same thing. Right? You've got something on your calendar, something's happening. You like the live action stuff, but you're really doing your work, right? So category 3, these people, this is the group that likes to have something going on while they're doing their work, and the webinars give them a chance to block their calendar for that work. So to them, the webinar isn't a substitute way to fill their workday. It's another way to get more work done by not being
Right.
interrupted.
And I will say too that on the technical side, it's really important to optimize your audio for those people.
Yeah.
So the one thing that I see so frequently is people doing webinars, they don't optimize their audio, thinking of everybody who has that experience, because we're
Yeah.
all guilty of that, watching TV in the background just to have kind of like, that.
No, they'll spend 99% of their time focused on tweaking their slides and never bother to close their eyes and listen to the room that they're in, and then realize there's a fan running.
Right.
Right. But our brains are great at filtering out that kind of noise, but microphones are not. They pick up everything and treat it equally. So let's see, where was I? So for the third group, the kind who just like to have something live happening so they can actually focus on the work and they're not focusing on what you're saying and doing, really, to get and keep their attention. Well, first of all, you have to start by accepting that half or more of every webinar audience at any given second during a webinar or a live event, half of them are listeners, not viewers. Right? I've been looking at attention statistics for webinars forever. And only having half of the audience looking at the screen is the normal state of affairs. So your script, and you should have a script, right? You should have a script, right? Your script needs to be written for listeners. And that's worth repeating. Every script, and you should have a script, every script should be written for listeners first and viewers second, because then you catch everybody.
I will say too, though, if you write a script, make sure that you really take that script to heart. Spend time to learn it and all that. Because the one thing you don't want to look like is that you're reading it.
Right. I mean, teleprompters are great, and teleprompters have come a long way. They're all iPad based now. They're just apps. They're very adaptive and stuff. They're great, but yeah, you don't want to. I'm less worried about someone looking like they're reading a teleprompter because
Like
if they're far enough away, you can't really tell. But how they sound, right? And this is like, before I get into the fourth group, let's talk about this for a second.
Yes.
Everyone who's watching this or listening to this, either live or whenever, unless they've written a speech that someone's going to, say, they've never once, when they were writing something, a blog post, an article, a book, term paper, email, whatever, they've never once thought about the reader's breathing, because they didn't have to, right? People who read silently, their breathing is automatic and you never need to think about it. But if you're writing for yourself or someone else who's going to actually say something, those people very stubbornly are going to insist on breathing every few seconds. And so you need to write it in a way so that there are lots of breaks, there are lots of periods, some commas, pauses. There are lots of opportunities for them to take a breath. Otherwise, I mean, they'll sound like they're reading a phone book, and everybody has a bad experience. Let's see, where are we? Okay, so the fourth group. Some people register and show up because they feel obligated. Maybe their boss or coworker is the presenter. Their company is hosting the webinar, right? Their manager sent an email to everyone with the registration link, and the implication is make our webinar look more successful by attending this thing, right?
Yeah.
To me, those people are similar to the category 3 people, the ones who are going to have something live happening while they're working.
Definitely.
Except they're not there by choice. They're present because they feel they have to be, and they're the least happy of anyone in the audience. Because they need to pay enough attention to be able to say something about the webinar afterwards if they're ever asked, but they'll still try to get some work done while the webinar is happening. So for sort of captive and resentful audiences, we're trying to keep them off balance a little bit. Even if they're coworkers and maybe your bosses, and they feel like they know everything about what you're talking about, you always want to include something that they didn't know about themselves or about the company or about the product or the service, right? You know things they don't. And these people want to feel like their attendance was validated. So let them learn something that makes them smarter about a topic they thought they already understood.
I think webinars should be a great learning opportunity anyways, because that's kind of what attracts people to them is, hey, maybe I'll learn something. That's usually the secondary thought.
Yeah, regardless of whether your boss is making you attend.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's the four categories of audience members. We like to think that everybody is in category one and they're there because we're so amazing and the topic is so interesting and we're recognized as experts and whatever, right? And so they made the effort to attend because your presentation would be worthwhile, right? It makes us feel better about ourselves. It makes us feel like our time isn't being wasted. But if you're using in sort of like everything done for you webinar team like mine, or you're doing it on your own, you have to assume that all four types of people are in the mix. And if it seems like I'm suggesting, or or anyone else who's reading it suggests, you should put a picture or a sentence or a slide here that sort of doesn't line up with what the people in category one would care about, it's
Right.
because you're targeting the other three categories, right? You want everyone who attends to have the best possible experience. We want them to register for your next webinar voluntarily, even if their boss is going to be on it, right? And if they don't want, if they don't already work with you, we want them to move closer to you and your company. And that's basically the goal of every B2B webinar is to convey that it's safe and possibly valuable to let them move closer to your company, even if you're the employee, you don't own the company, but it's safe to let them come closer and to engage and have a conversation with them, and ultimately to make them sort of part of your permanent business audience, and then eventually they become customers.
Awesome.
So 4 types of people.
Yeah, I was gonna say, are there any other little tricks that you would suggest to kind of keep people's attention going through the webinar, or
Oh yeah, there's tons of them. Like I have a let's see, I have a webinar I did for a big group, 500 something, I think, people in Dubai last year, like 9 months ago. It was all about getting and keeping the audience and getting back the audience's attention if you lose them. Like how when I'm writing just the scripts, not even like the end-to-end full webinar thing with the landing pages and the email sequences. When I'm just writing like scripts for somebody, CEO or CTO. Yeah, there's all kinds of tricks that you use. Let's see, how do you get to that? It might be. That is on the YouTube channel. If you actually go to YouTube and you search for Way Creative, like 2 words, there's a YouTube channel there. Or else if someone went to waycreative.com, I think right up on the top, there's like some green text. And if they click on that, they can see the 3-part series I did last year. So the first one was what to do in the first 5 minutes, everything to do in the first 5 minutes of a webinar or a live event, like the most crucial 5 minutes of the whole thing in the first 5, right? And then the second one was getting and keeping and getting back the audience attention. And the third one was the broccoli of all webinar topics, which is how to choose your call to action and then build in a path to it right from the very beginning of your webinar down to when you finally like present it to people. Nobody likes to do the call to action, man. Everybody just says they put in all this work on their slides and they might even rehearse stuff. And then they'll say, so thanks guys, and visit our website. I'm like, that's it, right? Like you just wasted your opportunity to get people to sign up for an account or a trial or talk to sales or watch a demo or download a PDF or something, because we just sort of bolt on the call to action at the end. And it's like, it's very much a sort of a disappointing end to most webinars. Also, a lot of people will only show up to webinars to watch what they think is their part. Like if you think of a webinar as having 3 pieces, there's an intro, there's a body, and then there's a pitch for a lot of these, right?
Right.
So if you're interested in this topic, like our salespeople are standing by, book a demo here, blah, 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 right? A lot of people will drop at the end of section 2 because they think their part of the webinar is over and it's just going to be a pitch.
Right.
So you have to sort of like interweave and thread your call to action from the beginning all the way down. So by the time you get there, you sort of transition into it and it seems very natural. And then really what you're trying to achieve is people who are like watching the information part, their part of the webinar, right? The main part. When you transition into your pitch, it just sounds like a natural extension and people will think, yeah, people like me would do something like that. It would be, this is the rational, logical, natural next step, given what I've just seen, is to explore this a bit further or try it out or sign up for the newsletter or whatever it is you're trying to get them to do. You just can't bolt it on at the end with like a hard, abrupt pivot and then expect the audience.
Yeah, because it's not natural.
Yeah, it seems off. People's defenses go back up really fast.
Yep, we repel stuff that's not natural.
Yeah. So that's all I have on this one today.
Awesome, great.
All right, my friend. I will see you tomorrow. I don't remember what tomorrow's topic is.
I don't either, but that's okay.
but that's okay. You know,
We'll surprise everyone, including ourselves.
yeah, including ourselves. I'll know what the topic is at 8 a.m. tomorrow, and then everyone else can learn soon after that. All right.
Sounds good.
See ya. Bye.